Have you ever witnessed an act of discrimination? While everyone else just watched, no one spoke up. No one reacted. And the person who was insulted stayed silent. But just a few minutes later, that very silence would become the most powerful protest. And then in just 60 seconds, the entire system had to change. Today's story begins in a quiet bank branch in the heart of the city. A black man in a wheelchair gently pushed open the door and entered. No one noticed. No one welcomed him. All eyes brushed past him as if he were a shadow. He didn't say much, didn't bother anyone. He simply came to withdraw a small amount from his own account. But what happened next? No one, not even the sarcastic teller, could have anticipated. In a matter of minutes, the man that the entire room had dismissed would bring the entire system to its knees. Not with shouting, not with outrage, but with calm timing and a single phone call. What you're about to witness is a moment that may seem ordinary, but within it lies everything: silence, dignity, justice, and the quiet strength of one human being. A story that will make you rethink how we see others and how we act when no one is watching. Let me take you into the story of one man, one wheelchair, and a lesson that made an entire society pause. That morning in Boston was chilly. Autumn sunlight filtered softly through the tall windows of a crowded bank branch nestled in a busy business district. The rhythmic clicks of high heels on the marble floor, the beep of the automatic door with every customer entering, and polite greetings exchanged like a rehearsed routine. Among the stream of people entering, one man moved slower than the rest. He didn't walk in on his feet, but rolled quietly into the lobby in his wheelchair. A faded charcoal wool coat clung to his shoulders, the sleeves slightly frayed. His silver hair was neatly trimmed, not a single head turned. No greetings were given. He didn't ask for anything extravagant. All he needed was a simple transaction just to withdraw a part of his monthly pension. But the first thing he received was a look of disdain. The teller on duty, a young woman in her early 30s, rolled her eyes as he approached the counter. She sighed loudly and deliberately, as if his presence had ruined her morning. No smile. No hello, sir, how can I help you today, like she'd given the others. Just a scowl followed by a curt voice ID. If you even have an account, place it here. The man still smiled softly. He calmly took his wallet from his coat pocket and handed over his documents. No anger, no asking. Why are you talking to me like that? Just a direct gaze, steady, unflinching. And the most startling part, he wasn't surprised. It wasn't the first time he'd been treated like he didn't belong. Perhaps he was used to how society saw him. Black, elderly, disabled. Three labels enough for many to place him in the margins without a second thought. But here's where the young woman made a grave miscalculation. Dignity doesn't reside in a pair of legs. Dignity is in how someone enters a space, even in a wheelchair, with calm grace and never lets anyone pull them beneath the decency they carry. In many cultures, the elderly and the disabled are shown particular respect. Yet here in a place labeled customer service, the first thing he received was suspicion and sarcasm. You don't need someone to be like you to deserve your respect. You don't need to know their income, health, or status to smile and greet them like a fellow human being. Because the way you look at someone tells them everything about who you are. But he, the man in the wheelchair, did not respond with harsh words. He simply asked, "What's your name?" A simple question, but one that would spark the storm to come. Because sometimes, silence is the gentlest warning before everything changes. And next you'll witness something no one in that bank, including the woman mocking him, could have imagined. The young teller's name was Stephanie. She looked sharp, dressed in a neat beige suit with her blonde hair tied back in a tight bun. She was the type who could easily make a customer feel well served if she wanted to. But that morning she didn't want to, at least not with the man sitting in front of her in a wheelchair. She glanced at the ID he handed her, then muttered under her breath, half smirking, half mocking, "Is this card even valid? Looks ancient." Without waiting for an answer, she turned to her colleague and said loud enough to be heard, "Every time these kinds of folks come in, it's always a waste of time." That sentence didn't need to be shouted. It didn't contain profanity. It just needed the right tone, the right moment, and the right target. And that was enough. Enough to wound, enough to belittle, enough to make someone feel unwelcome. This is what we call casual cruelty. Not the kind of extreme acts that make headlines, not public violence, protests, or confrontations. It's softer but more insidious. It comes through seemingly harmless words, dismissive glances, and arrogant tones that treat others as burdens. Racism today doesn't always wear a uniform. It doesn't always carry torches like the Ku Klux Klan did. It doesn't always show up in loud places. It hides in customer service counters' offices, or even over breakfast conversations at coffee shops. And often it comes from people who don't think they're racist at all. In a recent report from Pew Research Center, over 60% of Black Americans said they had been treated like suspects in completely ordinary situations, shopping, driving, even visiting a bank. No one says out loud, "I'm not serving you because you're Black." But the stares, the physical distance, the polite discomfort, they all carry that message. The man in our story understood this. That's why he wasn't angry. He wasn't surprised. He'd seen this before. Many times, in many places. And he knew sometimes discrimination doesn't need weapons, it just needs one person to believe they're superior. Discrimination doesn't always arrive in heated moments. It creeps in through offhand remarks, unconscious frowns, and the impatience reserved only for a certain type of person. And if we're not careful, or if we choose to ignore it, we become part of it too. But you know what's beautiful? Just like disrespect can spread, kindness has its own contagious power. It only takes one person to break the silence, and things can change very quickly. Because in just a few more minutes, the man everyone thought was a nobody would make them all see him differently. That morning inside the bank lobby, it wasn't just him and the teller. At least 8 other people, customers and staff, were close enough to hear every word, every condescending remark Stephanie made. One person was filling out a form, another waited in line. A young male staffer stood behind a counter nearby, eyes glued to his computer screen. And the strangest thing, no one spoke up. No one defended him. No one asked the woman, "Why are you saying that?" No one turned to him with comfort or even looked at him kindly. They weren't cruel. None of them were evil, but they were silent. It's what psychology calls the bystander effect. When many people witness the same wrongdoing, everyone assumes someone else will intervene, and so no one does anything. The sense of responsibility is diluted in the crowd. Part of us fears conflict. Another part just hopes it'll pass quickly. It's a survival instinct, but one that allows injustice to thrive. In 1964 in New York, a woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked just outside her apartment building. As many as 38 neighbors heard her screams, but no one called the police, and she died in silence. That case became a defining lesson in modern psychology. When everyone sees, no one feels responsible. Back to the bank. One of the customers, a middle-aged woman in a red coat, glanced toward the scene. There was a flicker of unease in her eyes. Maybe she wanted to say something. Maybe she felt discomfort. But then she turned away. Just a slight shake of the head, and she went back to tapping on her phone. Silence is not harmless. Sometimes it cuts the deepest. And when we choose not to intervene, we unintentionally side with the one doing harm. But action doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes a nod of support, a look of empathy, a simple "I'm with you" can be enough to shift the moment. One small act can break the ice of indifference and sometimes restore someone's dignity. But that morning in that room, no one did. No one except the very man being demeaned. And that is what made him remarkable. Because when no one stood with him, he still stood, though, on wheels. He didn't need a crowd. He didn't need applause. Just one phone call. One sentence said at the right time. His name was Raymond Carter. He was 67 years old. And the wheelchair he sat in wasn't a sign of weakness. It was living proof of a past one no one in that bank lobby knew. Raymond was once a civil rights attorney who had spent nearly 3 decades defending those mistreated, from underpaid workers to Black students denied admission under the excuse of not meeting standards. He had once been honored by a state governor for his fight against racial discrimination in public housing systems. And if anyone had bothered to look the name, Raymond Carter had appeared in newspapers not because he sought fame, but because he stood for justice. But today he wasn't there as a lawyer, not in a sharp suit, not with his familiar leather briefcase. He was just a retired man withdrawing pension money in a body no longer as strong as it once was. His legs no longer moved like they used to after a car accident caused by a drunk driver. But his spirit was still as steady as the first time he walked into a courtroom. When the bank teller threw sarcasm at him, he didn't respond with rage. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't say, "Do you know who I am?" He simply looked at her and asked, "What's your name?" A simple question, but in that context it meant more than courtesy. It was a gentle reminder that he was listening and that he wouldn't forget. That was his power, the power of calm, of unshakable grace. He didn't need to prove his worth with retorts, because those who know who they are don't need to shout to be heard. In a noisy world where everyone is racing to be louder to defend themselves with rage, calmness is what makes people stop and listen. Raymond didn't speak much, but every act he made carried the weight of a life spent facing injustice. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for 27 years. But when he walked out of jail, he didn't choose revenge. He chose dialogue. He chose to build. Because those who've endured the worst often have the strength to create the best. Never underestimate someone just because they don't stand up, don't fight back, or don't respond with fury. Some people like Raymond carry within them an ocean of calm deeper than any storm. Right after that brief exchange, Raymond didn't retreat or leave. He simply took out his phone, pressed a familiar number. His voice was deep and steady. "Hello, I'm facing a troubling situation at Branch 47. No one in the room knew they were about to witness something unforgettable. Because in just a few minutes, every eye in the room would turn toward him, not in pity, but in respect. And then, the small world of that bank lobby began to shift. What came next was the phone call that changed everything. The phone in Raymond's hand was an old model tiny screen physical buttons, not the kind of sleek smartphone people usually associate with power. But from that phone with a brief call, everything began to change. He dialed without hesitation, not frantically, not angrily. His voice was calm, firm, and purposeful, like he'd done this hundreds of times before. "Hi, Diana, this is Raymond Carter. I'm at Branch 47. There's a situation that needs urgent attention." A short pause. "Yes, I was just denied service despite providing full documentation. It's all on camera. I won't be leaving until the issue is addressed." A quiet nod followed and he ended the call. That was it, nothing more than a minute. And the world began to pivot. No one in the room knew he had just called Diana Huxley, the Regional VP of Ethics and Community Relations, someone who had worked side by side with Raymond on a landmark lawsuit advocating for banking accessibility for people with disabilities. They were old allies, people who knew all too well what bias looked like and how to stop it. Within minutes, the bank's internal system pinged. An emergency notice was sent to the branch manager. On the teller's screen, a small message appeared: "Pause all transactions. Remain at station. Manager is on the way." Stephanie froze. She glanced at Raymond, who had returned to quiet stillness, with a different look in her eyes. No longer disdain, no longer mockery. For the first time that morning, she looked at him as someone who mattered. And that is the special nature of power. When used wisely, it doesn't need to be loud. It simply makes everything around it realign. In today's world, we often think power lies in volume, in titles and control. But sometimes power is knowing whom to call, when to speak, and how to keep your dignity, while others lose theirs. In 1955, a black woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white passenger on a Montgomery bus. She didn't shout, she didn't argue, she just didn't stand up. And in that moment, she sparked the American Civil Rights Movement. Just one person, one decision, one moment. But the weight of it changed history. You don't have to be a CEO. You don't need a million followers. You just have to hold firm to your values and speak up at the right time. Because sometimes even a short phone call can overturn an entire system of injustice. And just like that, the quiet bank branch began to stir, not with noise, but with a shift in atmosphere, in posture, in tone. People started to notice. Those who had been silent now sensed something was happening. And then the door behind the counter opened. A middle-aged man in a navy blue suit stepped out with a serious expression. The branch manager had arrived. The story was about to reach its peak, where everything becomes clear: the truth, the consequences, and justice. The door swung open behind the teller counter. Mitchell Reynolds, the bank branch manager, stepped out with a composed but stern face. No smile, no typical "good morning" as on other days. He walked straight to counter 3, where Stephanie stood stiff behind her keyboard. All eyes turned to him. No one spoke, but the entire room seemed to pause. Mitchell didn't rush. He stood in front of the teller and asked plainly, "What happened just now?" Stephanie stammered, he wasn't clear. "I just asked for clarification, that's all." Her words were fractured defensive. She didn't realize that behind her, a security guard held a tablet with a freshly retrieved security recording. No debate was needed. Mitchell watched the video for a few seconds, then turned to the young woman. "I've seen enough. No need for explanations. You're suspended effective immediately. Please step away from your station. No yelling. No damage. Just the truth being acknowledged and the right action taken." And in that moment, justice wasn't abstract. It was specific, visible, and decisive. Stephanie stood frozen, not because she lost her job, but because she lost face. In front of colleagues, in front of customers, in front of a man she once assumed was less important. Raymond said nothing more. No gloating, no smugness. Just a small nod as if to acknowledge I've been heard. The right thing was done. And that's the quiet beauty of instant karma, when accountability arrives exactly when and where it's due. You see, not all mistakes need tomorrow to be corrected. Some actions, no matter how small, like a mocking remark, can deeply wound someone's dignity. And when a system, a company, or an individual is willing to take immediate responsibility, it not only heals the person harmed, it teaches everyone something. In 2020, a Starbucks employee in the U.S. refused service to a black customer for not wearing a mask properly, even though white customers were allowed without a word. The incident went viral. Within 24 hours, the employee was suspended. Starbucks later issued a public apology and revamped its equity in service training. One discriminatory moment in a system-wide lesson. Accountability doesn't always have to be punishment. Accountability is an opportunity to correct and a message that every action, however small, carries moral weight. When prejudice strikes at the edge of someone's dignity, justice, if swift, can preserve trust. From the back of the room, one customer quietly began to clap. Then another. Not a loud ovation, but enough to make a sound of agreement. The bank was no longer just a place of money transactions. It had just become a place that proved a timeless principle. Treat others the way you want to be treated. The story doesn't end there, because after the incident, it was time to look deeper into a truth far bigger than that small bank lobby. A truth that few dare say out loud, yet millions live with every single day. When Stephanie left the teller's desk, everyone in the bank was still watching Raymond. Some lowered their heads as if silently apologizing for their earlier silence. Some staff whispered to each other like people waking up from something familiar, but never properly named. And the saddest part is this: Raymond's story isn't unique. It's not special because it's rare, but because this time, someone remembered it, someone spoke up, and there were consequences right when they mattered. Across America, every single day, thousands of people like Raymond Black, disabled, elderly, or simply different, are quietly treated as if they don't belong where they absolutely have the right to be. No one throws water on them. No one forces them out. But the looks, the distance, the tone, the cold manner of service are more than enough to make someone feel small. Discrimination today isn't loud. It's smarter, subtler, but just as painful. According to a 2023 Pew Research study, over 56% of Black Americans said they've received noticeably worse service at restaurants, banks, or hospitals just because of their skin color. A shocking number, not just because it's high, but because we've become used to treating it as normal. Just last month in Chicago, a Black veteran named James Walker, who also used a wheelchair, was denied a hotel room because he didn't have a reservation, even though the front desk welcomed white guests right after him without any questions. The security footage recorded everything. The internet was outraged. But what was most heartbreaking was James's own reaction. "I wasn't shocked. This kind of thing happens more often than people think." Raymond understood that, and perhaps that's why he didn't get angry. Because he knew this wasn't just about him and Stephanie. It was a symptom of something much bigger, more persistent, and far more dangerous if we keep brushing it off as no big deal. Prejudice doesn't always come from hate. Sometimes it comes from thoughtlessness, from never asking ourselves, am I making someone feel small right now? And because of that, each of us has a role not just to avoid discrimination, but to see it and stop it when it happens. Raymond didn't need anyone's pity. What he needed, and what we all need, is awareness. Awareness that whether you're a bank teller, a bus driver, a teacher, or just a passerby, You always have the choice to show kindness or to look away. And when that awareness spreads even just a little, society truly begins to shift. Raymond's story is a mirror, but now it's time to face another question, one deeper, more difficult. That morning, Stephanie didn't just lose a job. She lost the trust of her colleagues, the respect of customers, a part of her self-image she may never have thought was important until it shattered. But she wasn't the only one who lost something. The bank lost its credibility, at least in the eyes of those who were there. One moment of discrimination, even a small one, was enough to make people wonder, is this place safe for me, fair to my mother, kind to my child? And beyond that, society also lost an opportunity to connect instead of divide. When someone is mistreated just for being different, we don't just hurt them. We miss the chance to learn from them, to work with them, to build something greater than ourselves with them. Racism doesn't just hurt the victim. It weakens the community morally, culturally, and economically. According to a report by McKinsey and Company, racial discrimination costs the U.S. trillions of dollars every decade just in missed opportunities in employment, education, and healthcare. But even that number, even in the trillions, cannot measure the cost of a sarcastic remark that breaks someone's dignity. It can't quantify the cost of making someone like Raymond feel unwelcome, even in a place that should belong to everyone. In 2018, a black professor at a prestigious university was approached by campus security because he was wandering around suspiciously. He was the department chair. He had the office keys, a faculty ID, and his name engraved on a plaque at the main lobby. But because he didn't look like a professor, he was asked to leave. The incident caused outrage, led to student transfers, lost donors, and severely damaged the university's reputation. Discrimination isn't a minor error. It's a cost paid not just in money, but in trust, unity, and human dignity. Every time we stay silent in the face of prejudice, we lose a piece of ourselves, the part that is kind, just, and worth being proud of. But on the other hand, every time someone speaks up like Raymond did, we reclaim a piece of that better world we all want to live in. That morning, the bank lost a staff member, but the entire room gained something far more valuable: awareness. No one dared to joke casually again. No one thought it's just a small thing. And sometimes moments like that are the beginning of larger change. But there's one more thing, subtler, quieter, but just as important. Will the person who made the mistake recognize it and grow from it? And will we, the witnesses, still believe in redemption, forgiveness, and the possibility of change? That's where the story enters its most meaningful chapter, the place where responsibility and humanity meet. 3 days after the incident at the bank, an email arrived in Raymond's inbox. It was from Stephanie. No fancy words, no lengthy explanations, just a few simple lines. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Not because of pressure, not because of misunderstanding, but because I let my bias override my kindness. Thank you for not yelling. Thank you for not doing what I probably deserved. If possible, I'd like to start again. Raymond read the email, then set it down. He didn't smile. He didn't sigh. He just quietly closed his eyes for a moment, like someone who understands that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to carry that burden forward for either of them. The question now is this: should one mistake, one disrespectful comment, one misguided look destroy a person's future forever? That's not an easy question to answer, because justice isn't just about punishment. Justice is about fairness and the ability to correct what's been done wrong. In today's society, there's a strong tendency to cancel someone after a single bad moment. One wrong word, job lost. One insensitive comment, public shaming. One mistake, doors closed permanently. But does that really create change? Or does it just plant more fear instead of awakening understanding? In 2021, a university student in California was suspended for a private racist joke shared in a group chat. The message was leaked. He was publicly condemned, lost his scholarship, and his family eventually moved to escape the backlash. Later, he issued a sincere public apology, joined racial equity education programs, and became a youth speaker at anti-racism workshops. 3 years later, he was invited back to the university not as a student, but as a speaker to inspire others. People can do wrong, but the real question is, do they want to make it right? And does society give them the chance to do so? Stephanie apologized, not to escape blame, but to begin the journey of understanding how she hurt someone. Raymond didn't respond with anger. He replied with just one sentence. I forgive you, but I hope you never see this as a small thing. Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, but it opens the door to something bigger growth. And when forgiveness comes from the person who suffered most, it not only heals, it enlightens. Raymond's story doesn't end with applause. It ends with silence, deep enough to make you reflect, soft enough for anyone to feel. But before we close the chapter, there is one final truth, something that can't be measured by laws or resolved by verdicts, dignity. What Raymond held on to wasn't granted to him by others. He didn't earn it by shouting or demanding recognition. He proved it by how he carried himself through injustice. Over a week after the incident at the bank, Raymond returned to the same branch, this time not to withdraw money, but to open a savings account for his granddaughter, who had just received a full scholarship to a music conservatory. When he rolled his wheelchair through the door, no one looked at him like a questionable customer. A new staff member stood up, walked toward him with a genuine smile. Good morning, Mr. Carter. It's a pleasure to see you again. The atmosphere in the familiar room had changed. No more tension, no more guarded looks, only respect, quiet, unspoken, but deeply felt. And at that moment, the branch manager, Mr. Mitchell, walked out, shook Raymond's hand and said, Thanks to you, we had to look inward. And that was necessary. No medal, no speech. But Raymond didn't need any of that, because he knew dignity is not something others give you. It's something you prove by how you remain steady in the face of injustice, by how you stay calm through storms, and by how you treat others, even when they don't treat you right. Dignity is not given. It's proven. You don't need to seize it with grandeur. You only need to live in a way that even if people disagree, they can't deny you deserve it. In 1994, a man from South Africa, who had spent nearly 3 decades in prison, walked out not to seek revenge, but to unify a nation. Nelson Mandela, with slow steps and a soft voice, made the entire world listen. He didn't need to be called great, because the way he lived was the proof of greatness. Each of us, wherever we are, whatever we do, will have moments when our dignity is tested. Maybe it's when someone treats you unfairly. Maybe it's when you're misunderstood. Or maybe it's when you have the chance to get even, but you choose not to. Those are the moments that define you. Because you're not just defending yourself, you're showing others that there is a higher way to live. And perhaps the most beautiful part of this story isn't what happened at the bank nor the apology that followed. It's the image of an elderly man seated in a wheelchair, gently smiling and holding steady, even as others tried to strip him down. Because he knew people can take your place, your belongings, even your health. But if you don't let go of your dignity, then no one can take it from you. That is the final turn, not of a confrontation, but of a life lived right. And now, as this story comes to a close, its echoes remain with a question for each of us. How will we choose to live when no one is forcing us to choose right? Let this ending lead us towards something practical, a small, meaningful change. And if you're wondering where that change could begin, then this next part is for you. You've just witnessed a story not about outrage, but about steadfastness. Not about revenge, but about choosing what's right even in silence. Raymond didn't demand attention. He didn't ask for special treatment. He simply entered with dignity and left with the respect he always deserved. This story isn't just about a bank of man or a mistake. It's about you. It's about me. It's about all of us who each day face situations where a choice must be made. Will we bow our heads and stay silent, or will we speak up in words and actions, or simply in how we choose to live? If this story made you pause, even for a moment, share it, because someone out there may need the reminder that they matter, that they belong. Have you ever experienced a moment like this? Share it in the comments below. I read every story, every emotion you share. And if you'd like to continue hearing true moving human stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next awakening moment. Because you know what, a single video may not change the whole world, but it can change one soul. And sometimes that's enough. See you in the next story.